How do you guys feel that Trump's economy was pre-COVID-19?
I like it. I think it's due to a lot of factors more than just Trump. With the tax cut and all that. I think there's a lot of
There's a
factors
positive
that
and negative.
President. I mean, I think the whole overall economy up until like late 2019 was pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, we see at the same time we have like Donald Trump like touting the stock market. When in previous debates with Hillary Clinton, he's talked about how the stock market's a bubble and that bubble's going to burst, and it just takes one thing to burst that bubble. Kind of how we saw in the 2008 housing crisis, and now what we've seen with COVID, when we're so over leveraged. But how do you respond to like the people that say that this good Donald Trump economy is just an extension off of the Obama era economy?
All right, I got actually hold up.
Let's
Gonna be fun. All right, so if you're looking at job creation per month, so from 2014 it was at 250, then it went to 2015 it went to 227, 2016 195, which is when Donald Trump came into the White House. It went down to 176, and then it went up to 193 in 2018. And then 2017 it went down again, presuming COVID.
Well, I don't think it's really a question of if we saw growth, but is that good growth and how we got to that growth. So in any kind of economic system, especially something that's a Keynesian economic system, where we see the government manipulating the market through the Federal Reserve, for example, through interest rates, through tax cuts that Trump did as well. We see it kind of like stimulate the economy more and more so until we're over leveraged, and then something like COVID happens, or something like I was saying the 2008 housing crisis happens, where it causes a quick recession. That's why we have a recession about every I would say 8 to 12 years. So if we saw actually in February of 2020, household debt was the highest it's ever been. It actually reached $14 trillion of household debt, and that was right before COVID. So now that's why we're seeing high levels of defaulting on our mortgages.
There's actually from 2014 all the way to 2019, it is called mortgage rate 30-year fix. So it was at 4.2%. Then it went to going down as it's good to 3.9 in 2015, and then 2016 3.7. Then it went up in 2017 to 4%. Then it went up again in 4.5. Now it's in 2019. It went back down to 3.9.
Well, that's kind of my point, is doing all these different things as well as the tax cut over leverages ourselves. So then when we do get a situation like this, where we have a COVID or we have anything else that kind of stops the economy in its tracks, and it kind of has that kind of circular motion of me giving money to one guy to give it to person B, to give it back to person C, to give it back to the original person A, that's where we kind of see the trouble. So I don't think I can really tout, or I can't really commend a Donald Trump economy, especially when it was just based off of pure stimulus. I think what we need to do, and would be the more optimal response, is yes, have those stimuluses in terms of tax cuts. However, instead of doing it by raising the national debt by $6 trillion in a 4-year period, we need to cut spending. I mean, I guess, how do you guys think it compares directly to Joe Biden? I mean, do you think one's more preferable than the other?
I prefer. I mean, if we're talking about Joe Biden's economy, I'm just assuming we're going to say, he was vice president 4 years ago. So I'm going to attribute him to Obama's economy. I would prefer pre-COVID. I prefer Trump's economy. Now, I'm not saying it's all Trump's fault that the economy was good, but there's obviously those extra factors that you brought up. But
I mean, how do you quantify a good economy then?
Trump took office with the economy ascending
was way up compared. That's one of the main how I mainly quantify that right there.
Sure, I guess that's pretty fair. What were we gonna say, Isaiah?
Well, I said when Trump took White House, the economy was starting to ascend.
Do you mean it was already ascending under Obama and then it continued during Trump, or what are you saying?
Yes. So for instance, unemployment rate. So in 2014 it was at 5.6. In 2015 it was at 5%. Then it went to 4.7 in 2016 and 4.1 in 2017. So 2016, that's when Donald Trump took office. It went to 4.1, then it went to 3.9 in 2018, and in 2019 it was at 3.5, which we considered its all-time low. But that has to do with Donald Trump's doing tax cuts, and his thing is to give more money to corporations to buy more land, build more businesses, and to employ more people.
I just don't see this being a viable solution of how it was done. For example, we pay about $400 billion each year just on our interest. obviously specifically to China. But in addition to that, we can obviously look at other countries like Venezuela, where they over-leveraged themselves at the national level so much that it came down to a full-on depression to where it is today. So I think we have to be very careful on focusing on how it's done, not just the instantaneous results.
And
you
then
can't,
how would
you can't live
how
off
would you
Monster for your entire life.
like how would you feel? How do you feel about Trump like going after China with like the tariffs and the tax on goods coming in from China?
Yeah, I mean, I think the research has kind of shown that it's been pretty negative in its effects, especially on American consumers.
Oh yeah, like farmers and stuff for sure. Most definitely.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, I think the point really comes to this is, what do you guys think is your like optimal solution in terms of an economic system of how we would proceed from where we are now? Because I think personally, what would come to me is, transitioning less from a Keynesian economic standpoint to going towards more of an Austrian economic system, where we don't manipulate the market so we don't see these big, recessions come every 8 to 12 years. I think that's definitely the first step. And then obviously, like I was saying, we can have stimulus, but have stimulus in terms of cutting spending.
Agreed. And then Donald Trump did do that with the big tax cut against, military and all kinds of other government funding.
Right. But I mean, even before COVID, we see these like massive spikes in the national debt.
Of course,
I hear a lot of conservatives trying to
each president has accumulated a great debt.
Yeah, I mean, I'd argue that Donald Trump's probably been one of the most substantial ones, though. I'm going from, I believe, 20 trillion, if I'm not mistaken, when he took office, to 26 trillion. And then in his first 4 years, and then Obama went from 10 trillion to 20 trillion, which was at the time, obviously, the biggest one.
Yes, so that's in all 8 years. How many?
But I mean,
how much did he raise the debt in 8 years?
Yeah, the 10 trillion.
Yeah, so.
But at the same time, he also inherited a recession. So I don't think that's exactly a fair comparison.
From George Bush, yeah.
Right, exactly.
Which got from
I wouldn't necessarily blame it against George Bush. I think that's just because of our economic system that we have in place as well severely.
And relying on China.
I mean, obviously, you blame the captain of the ship for whatever. He's responsible, but if we're looking at it realistically, there's a whole lot of extra factors. I mean, that too. That's part of them. Like how Tristan was talking about the Keynesian versus the Austrian economics. We're just way over leveraged right now. So it's not.
Can you like?
Sure. Yeah. So when I'm referring to Keynesian, when I'm referring to Keynesian economics, I'm referring to an economic system that encourages governments to be involved in the market. So specifically, like I was saying before, by doing massive tax cuts is one way we can stimulate the economy. Additionally, we can mess with interest rates, specifically with like the Federal Reserve. That'll obviously go down to the everyday chain banks. That'll affect the interest rate that you get. So obviously, the denomination of people acts very predictably when put in a set circumstance. So considering the government does know that, we can kind of control how much people spend, and we historically have been using that to cause people to overspend. And Austrian economics focuses more on like production, on saving money. So like when situations like this come, it isn't an issue. So I think that would be the main difference, and that's why I would think that would be a more preferable system. Granted, in a Keynesian system, obviously you can have more economic growth in a short period of time, but that comes with its downfalls as well.
Yeah, then you come into recession every 8 years, you said.
It happens about every 8 to 12 years. It happened in 2008 most recently, and then obviously the current climate we have to see ourselves in with COVID. Exactly. But yeah, what do you guys think about like generally kind of Biden's plan, assuming he takes office?
Well, what I noticed, and you brought this up earlier, is that $15 minimum wage is one of the main things I would see.
Would you guys support that policy?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, we've seen. We see Seattle right now currently has a $15 minimum wage, and they're struggling pretty hard right now. I mean, these small businesses have to increase the price of their product, while they also end up decreasing the hours of their workers.
I believe the number comes from, it was like for every 1% increase that we see from their hourly wage, it's a 3% reduction in how many hours they work. And I think we see this throughout the entirety of America, where we see.
When you read Bertie's, Joe Biden's political policy on economy, he talks about the middle class, and that's where the $15 minimum wage comes in. when he's talking about the middle class.
Right, exactly. But I think we can think objectively and say that we're going to see more, assuming that we had a national $15 minimum wage. One, we would obviously see more kiosks, more self-checkouts. Like, I can go to McDonald's right now, all around. Yeah, exactly. And that just encourages businesses to go more and more into automation and not actually hire actual employees to work in.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, it's going to hurt the middle class. It's going to hurt the lower class.
Exactly. We see that happening more and more.
Take jobs away.
Like, do you think the kiosks have been like substantially more cheaper today than it was 5 years ago? No, of course not. It really comes down to more and more people raising for minimum wage. We see like Seattle go from like $10 an hour to 11 to 13 to now 15.
Like if you go to like a kiosk, you only see one person standing there like manning like 15 different kiosks, because you only need one person to fix it, or if they were like getting like alcohol for them to click the name, so they're, you know.
Right. I mean, I think even additionally, we see like online stores doing so much better than like its average like brick and mortar. Amazon obviously being super prominent in that field, but I think we see a multitude of factors that point to minimum wage tightening being very negative, especially on the lower class. I'm sure a handful of people would probably be very benefited from that. Great, sure. But at the same time, if we see so many people getting their hours cut, and additionally, we probably see many full-time employees go from full-time to part-time, and then there's obviously ramifications from that, from them losing their health care, them losing their dental, them losing their vacation time, and any other kind of benefits that normally come with any kind of full-time job. So I don't see a situation where a national $15 minimum wage has a overwhelming positive effect on the lower and lower middle class.
Agreed.
I think the $15 minimum wage, that's just a short-term fix, because obviously it's just going to keep going up. The real problem, in my opinion, is the rising inflation rate. We're just pumping money into the economy, hoping it'll fix it.
For instance, like Beto O'Rourke, when he was running for senator, he wanted to raise minimum wage to $18 in Texas, which is absurd.
That's insane.
It'd be like living in California.
Wait, so what do you guys think would be an optimal minimum wage, if any?
Well, it depends on each state is different, you know, like, you know how it's cheaper to live in Texas than it is California, and like it should flex with it would have to flex with each state. I don't think
more of a progressive.
I don't think you should mandate, you know, like each business has to have $15, even if it's a small business. Like the business is like a flower shop. Like, why would someone pay someone $15 to work at a flower shop? You know, it's kind of hard for a small business like that. You know,
but at the same time, we also need to be able to protect our employees.
Yeah, they want to be
predatory practices.
Yeah, they want to be pro small business, but they want to raising a $15 minimum wage would take out more small businesses than good.
Sure, and then just kind of get an idea of where you stand. Like, why don't you pick a specific state, and then what's a reasonable minimum wage to be set, if any?
Like, for instance, like Texas, like the minimum wage is around like, you know, $10. And like, but you go to most places and you get 12, 13, 14, 15.
Well, what do you think it should be in Texas then?
In Texas, it should be 10 is good, or even like 12.
Isn't it like 8 over there right now? Wouldn't that actually raise it?
When I first started working in Texas, it was $7.25. And then right now, when I got hired at another job, it was at 10. That was
now that you kind of
they were hiring.
Now that you kind of bring that up, I feel like, especially for like people that are having like their first job, that aren't worth $15 an hour worth of their experience, it'd be so much harder for them to get a first job. I mean, even me, when I was getting my first job at like 17 years old, it was super hard to find my first job. But the first job is always the hardest to find.
Like when I worked at the A&M when I was like 15, cleaning tables, it was like $6, $7 an hour.
Right, exactly.
Well, I don't think even minimum wage is the problem, because, I mean, if we take a look at the federal statistics, only 2.3% of all hourly workers make minimum wage. The rest of them make something higher than that. So I don't think raising the minimum wage is going to do anything except hurt people that are already making what the $15 an hour compared to the whatever $8 it is in Florida.
What Tristan's trying to, like, I kind of see what Tristan's trying to say. Like, you should be paid what you're worth. Of course, a team lead and a manager is going to make more money than a regular employee. They shouldn't be paid around the same, because they're both doing different things and they have different responsibilities, and you have to have different, like, you know, like experience in that field.
I don't even think you necessarily get paid what you're worth, though. I think you get paid off based off of how much leverage you have. And that's why I think that the market will itself kind of balance itself out. And I don't think the minimum wage is even a necessity to begin with. I personally would abolish the minimum wage.
You go do it away with all the way.
I would completely dump it.
Do you think there are going to be any businesses with predatory practices? Employing people for a very small amount, but people need work anyway, so they have to work there.
I mean, it really comes down to supply and demand at the end of the day.
So, out of curiosity,
yes,
I'll let you finish. Though.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, it comes down to like supply and demand at the end of the day. How many workers there are, based off of how many businesses there are willing to pay you, and I think that over time would naturally balance itself out.
Like out of curiosity, with mandating a minimum wage of $15. Like, how do you feel about people like mandating all businesses to give their full-time employees health care?
I think that really
You're
comes
saying
down
government
to
mandated.
Yeah, for full-time employees.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that really has to come down to you being able to get that based off of how you can leverage yourself in the market.
Okay. Yeah, because usually, if you become a full-time employee, you usually don't get your benefits right away. You usually have to work for a certain amount of time to get your benefits from the job.
Right, like a 6 months or like a year.
Or like a 90-day probation type of thing. 55% of Americans get their health care from their jobs.
I guess the counter argument to that would be, though, like now when we have like COVID, when we have I think it was like a max of like 15% unemployment rate, those 15% of people, or at least the vast majority of them, are losing their health care. So wouldn't that be an argument for like a universal health care?
Well, I wouldn't say so. I guess you can put a universal health care in effect during a pandemic, when diseases and stuff strikes the earth, comes around, because if people can't get jobs right away after they just got laid off, or they can't find a job,
So is it basically whenever something bad happens, we need Uncle Sam to take over and take care of us? Or?
I wouldn't say, because because right now, if you can't get a job, because there's not that many jobs.
I don't see a situation where we have a crisis and instantly think that the solution is to dive into another man's pockets to save the majority of people. I don't think that's a moral or socially responsible system, personally. And obviously, when we're taking away from the taxpayers, which obviously is going to be the case, I think that's pretty much what's happening indirectly, but that is the essence of it. But yeah, no, another thing I wanted to jump into about Joe Biden. How do you guys feel about his economic plan for tuition?
We talked about it the other day, how someone who worked 3 jobs to pay off their tuition and then had to be taxed to pay off someone else's tuition. It's not, I don't think, it's not fair to that person, who worked hard to pay off his debt, and someone who doesn't want to pay off their own debt and has to be given a handout from the government, it's not fair. Joe Biden, he in all of, if you read a quick form of his thing, he talks about picking up policies from Bernie Sanders, for instance student debt.
I think about the college tuition crisis is
because he
says
he says healthcare is a right, not a privilege.
I mean, even if that is the logic, do we use that logic with any other rights we have? Like, for example, we have a Second Amendment right, but I wouldn't say that means the government should provide everybody with firearms. That doesn't really...
That'd be kind of cool.
I mean, that would be kind of cool, sure, but I would love an AR.
I would love an AR-14, Bernie. I mean, Joe Biden.
Oh yeah. Now they'd probably just give out high points, honestly.
Going back to
the yeet cannon. The yeet cannon.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, going back to that student debt crisis. I mean, it's kind of on yourself. It ain't up to Uncle Sam, in my opinion, because I mean, you signed your name, you knew what you were getting into. You wanted to take that class. It doesn't pay off at the end of the day. That's on you. It's not on my taxpayer money. It's not on Uncle Sam to take care of you.
It's an investment on yourself. Why should I have to take care of something you can't finish?
Oh yeah, no, of course, I 100% agree. And I think one of the main things we have to do is, one, the government can't continue to be guaranteeing these loans. Ever since they started guaranteeing these loans, we've seen that the price of tuition has risen 8 times the amount of inflation.
How do you feel about him wanting to make community colleges free? Lowering tuition at private institutions.
Well, man, I disagree with using taxpayer money to pay for anyone's education if they're at or over the age of 18. So that would include seniors in high school, and that would obviously extend to college as well.
Even though like community college, like for tuition, like if you were to go to Northwest Vista in San Antonio, Texas, it's legit $6,000 for a year. The whole shebang, $6,000.
What would you think about putting like a interest cap on these tuitions for colleges? I mean, because that's not taking out of the taxpayer money. That's just making sure these colleges can't charge, I don't know, for example, like 25% interest over 6 years of payment. Something crazy, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they do the same thing with like credit cards where they suggested like a 15% cap, and then most credit cards like 20 to like 25% interest rate. In the results we're going to get, it's going to be pretty yeah. Well, obviously it's a lot higher than like the home because they get possession of home. Like, there's not really anything tangible that they can take back. Same with like a car. But yeah, anyways, the obvious results are going to be that more poor people, like less people are going to be able to qualify for these specific loans. So less people are going to have the opportunity to do so, which is kind of the pros and cons of it.
Wouldn't that raise the value of actually going to college and getting a real degree?
If less people had degrees, then theoretically yes, because you'd be able to leverage yourself even higher so into a market, considering it's based off of supply and demand.